what I will say is that at 8 o'clock this morning, I was listening to Lumpin' Radio in Chicago because we are also on a WLPN FM 105.5. And the show that happened to be on this morning was the show we did on October 2nd, which is about Bell Bowl Prairie out at Chicago Rockford International Airport. It's pretty much surrounded by Chicago Rockford International Airport. And we it was a good show. It was a really good show, and it's an important show because this is a remnant prairie in Illinois. We used to be called the Prairie State. I think one of our guests said that actually. We used to be called the Prairie State. Well, we're still called the Prairie State, but we need to change the name because it doesn't apply anymore. And it's about how this remnant prairie is in danger of being bulldozed in a week from tomorrow. If something isn't done. I mean, who knows how fast that could happen. So let's just skip with all of the formalities here. And I will say that it's dark and stormy, and Rick DeMaio is going to get to that in
It was a dark and stormy morn.
yeah, he'll get to it in the second part of the show, and it's ominous, and there's going to be lots of rain. But you know what? We might lose a prairie as well. So let us bring in our guest here, and I'm going to check to make sure that all of their microphones are on and that everything's working and that everything doesn't shut down again. I don't think it's going to this time. It's just a wonder of technology here. So look on to the right of you and me, and I'm going to adjust my camera here a little bit. That's Kerry Leigh, who was with us back on October 2nd. She is the executive director, and by accident, I called you the CEO in the tease we did the other day, video tease of this.
But she's promoted.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a real difference, but she's the executive director of the Natural Land Institute, and the Natural Land Institute's mission is to create an enduring legacy of natural land in northern Illinois for people, plants, and animals. And by the way, they're among the groups leading the charge to save Bell Bowl Prairie. Thank you for being with us again, Kerry.
Oh, thank you, Mike and Peggy. I really appreciate it.
And then at the lower left corner, for those of you listening in quadraphonic sound, it's Domenico D'Alessandro. He's a regenerative design consultant. He's now retired, but he was president of D'Alessandro and Associates in Chicago. He and I have a common background. He worked for WRD Environmental for a while, and he's a special interest in urban ecology and regenerative designs for water quality management and habitat creation within the urban context. Domenico, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you. I welcome the opportunity.
And we're going to get to Domenico because he's got an alternative plan. That's the point of this show this morning. We talked about how the prairie was in dire straits several weeks ago. It still is. A lot has happened. We're going to go through some of that in just a second. But we're also going to have Jen Kuroda, who's in the lower right. She's the president of the Sinnissippi Audubon Society, a chapter of the National Audubon Society, which is located in Rockford, Illinois. The chapter was founded in 1972, is committed to wildlife preservation, but she's also the president of the Audubon Council of Illinois. The council represents 11 National Audubon Society chapters located throughout the state of Illinois. Jen, thank you so much for being with us as well.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are. and keep your fingers crossed everything doesn't shut down again. And I'm writing to those vMix people and say, what's going on here? Okay. Kerry, we're going to start with you because when we talked about this several weeks ago, first of all, a lot of people were just finding out that the prairie was in danger, including you, including your organization, which, according to what you've said before, really didn't have much of an inkling about this until August of this year, when bulldozers and other heavy machinery started showing up next to Bell Bowl Prairie on the airport grounds. Since then, there's been press. It's good to see that some of the press has got, not everybody's gotten on board, but more and more, little by little. In fact,
Yeah.
just the other day,
And nationally, too.
yeah, nationally, um, the Chicago Tribune jumped on it finally this week, but there are others who have been ahead of the game. Kudos to WTTW because they were in on it early. Of course, the Rockford papers were reporting on this from the get-go. And then the hue and cry from the environmental community has been very loud. As I mentioned on last week's show, the Open Lands Luncheon was picketed by some protesters with a sign, Save Belleville Prairie, right when Illinois Senator Dick Durbin was speaking. That got some press. And there have been op-eds and more, and people writing letters, thousands of letters to Governor J.B. Pritzker and to Durbin and to Senator Tammy Duckworth and to local legislators. How would you describe the impact of that right now, Kerry?
So, the impact of this grassroots campaign has been amazing. And I must say that when we first started this and started to get the word out, we really didn't have any idea that the grassroots campaign would take off in the way that it has. And not only has everybody been pitching in, but we have really creative minds who are coming up with solutions like Domenico. So the grassroots effort has actually extended beyond the state of Illinois. And we have had people from California helping us. We've had people from Alaska, many of them who have some roots in Illinois. But it's just captured the imagination of not just environmentalists, but people who care about what's happening to our natural world. It's been phenomenal. And the letters that have gone to our governor and our state senators and representatives, they've been gotten over 4,000. And there have been so many that I do know that the governor this week called a team meeting for his entire team to talk about this. So we haven't heard yet about any results of that meeting or any actions that might come out of it, but that's a good start.
Yes, it is a good start. However, this is information that you're privy to because you've been kind of the tip of the spear in this effort to preserve the prairie. In public, however, a lot of these legislators, policymakers have been, shall I say, ominously silent. Why do you think that is?
Well, I really think it's a matter of, one, maybe they don't have all the information, although we have had calls with many of them and to explain the process. But I really can't answer that, why they haven't come out publicly. I do know that our Senator Stottleman,
And that's a state senator.
He's a state senator for our region, and he had pledged to see if he could negotiate some sort of conversation with the airport about this alternative design because he understands, as do all of the legislators, they understand that our message is not to stop the airport expansion, but to come up with an alternative design so that we can have the airport expansion, we can have the jobs, we can have the economic growth, but we don't need to lose the prairie. We can still keep the prairie. And there are lots of ways to do that. I don't think that the Airport Authority and IDOT and the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, I don't think they understand.
Illinois Department of Transportation.
And the Illinois Department of Transportation. I don't think they understand what they have, frankly, that this is an ancient 8,000-year-old dry gravel hill prairie that has taken that long to mature and survive. And, it's what Domenico is going to be talking about is why is a parking lot so precious and an 8,000-year-old rare prairie so expendable?
And it's not just a parking lot, but that's sort of a key point. And there have been other suggestions among them. Well, we'll dig it up and we'll move it someplace else. And somebody in one of the articles that I've got listed on my blog post says, well, that's equivalent to taking a 500-year-old grandfather clock and smashing it to pieces, and I forget, using it for something else.
Roasting marshmallows.
Roasting
Throwing it in the
marshmallows.
fire and roasting marshmallows.
Here's my analogy. I came up with this by myself. My feeling is it's like going to the Tribune Tower and saying, well, you know what, you don't really need the Great Wall of China. We can take that down because there's a brick of it in the Tribune Tower downtown, and you can see the brick of the Great Wall
Yeah,
of
we
China.
moved the brick. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. So take down the Great Wall because we've got a brick of it here. In fact, we could take it down and let's put bricks all over the world, and then everybody will have a piece of the Great Wall, and it'll be exactly the same thing. And it's just a lack of understanding of how ecosystems work and biology. And I guess, Kerry, that is something that needs to get across. How can you teach that? It's something Rob Telfer, when he was on the show with us on October 2nd, said it's because people are not connected to prairies anymore. We're not connected to prairies because we don't have any. We've lost so many of them. There's no resonance here. Even now, in the 21st century, you can walk in a redwood forest and you can be amazed. All right, lots of people do that. There's so little prairie left that it's hard to walk in a prairie the way it was
Yeah.
created
And
by nature.
it doesn't have the grandeur, as it were, of the redwoods. People look at
Well,
it.
it did. It did at one
Yeah, but
point.
now.
It did.
Now.
Yeah,
So it's not
It's like-
underappreciated, undervalued.
right. Absolutely.
So where are we? Where are we with your efforts? Obviously, as you said, there's some movement behind the scenes. Does it really look like they're going to fire up the bulldozers on November 1st?
Well, we're still hopeful for a political solution because George Fell, the founder of the Natural Land Institute and also the founder of the Nature Conservancy, he, about 40 years ago, the airport wanted to dig this prairie up for gravel, and he appealed to the governor, and the governor stopped it. And George stood in front of the bulldozer and stopped it. So we need to stop it again, but now we also need to protect it permanently so that we don't have to go through this. This is the third time. George's father also saved the prairie. So we're working really hard. We're going to be putting out newspaper ads this week, some full page ads highlighting Domenico's design. So I'd really love him to share that with you and the concept behind it.
Well, we'd like to, but we really don't have time for that. Actually, I'm kidding. Due to technical difficulties, we can't do that on today's show. No, of course we're going to do that, and I'm teasing people with that. We've got some of the designs that he has made, and I want to get to him in a second. But before that, I want to talk to Jen. Yes, Peggy.
And I reposted, Arthur Melville Pearson is watching us. He's the biographer of George Fell. And he says, he posted as the biographer, something just moved on Restream. As the biographer of George Fell, I know how hard he and his father worked to save Bell Bowl Prairie the first two times. The third time needs to be the charm. Time to dedicate this rare ecological gem by dedicating it as an Illinois nature preserve.
I can't believe the folks who are watching this right now and are Julian Hoffman, who was on our show earlier this year, an author and naturalist. He writes, they don't understand what they have. Well said, Kerry. This is all too frequently the underlying issue when it comes to threatened places and all that stands to be lost with their destruction. Their accumulated ecological and cultural meaning, their vital importance to wildlife communities, the history of a landscape, and it speaks to a larger theme of how we encourage a greater valuation of such unique and increasingly rare places. Thank you, Julian. I'm glad you're watching as well. So let us go to Jen. That's a starting point. Tell us how Sinnissippi, rather, Audubon is involved in, and what we stand to lose in the prairie if it goes away.
Sure. Even historically, Sinnissippi Audubon was involved in speaking out against the expansion of the airport. And even in the 70s, there was another proposal for expansion, and Sinnissippi Audubon was involved at that time. But really, Audubon is really about birds and their habitat. And there was a report that came out a couple years ago where it was noted that since the 1970s, 3 billion species of birds, we've lost that amount of bird population. And the majority of that is due to habitat loss, climate change, fragmented habitat. And then if you look at the subspecies of grassland birds, if you look at the group of grassland birds from that overall population, 53% of the grassland bird population has declined in the past 50 years. So preserving prairies is very, very important for maintaining habitat so we can continue to have these birds.
And what has Sinnissippi done now? Have you been out to the prairie recently? I know that it's difficult to get there. There are warnings from the airport. This is private. I mean, it sounds as if even the access to the prairie in the last few weeks has changed dramatically.
It has. I went out on the 17th of September because that's when I probably found out maybe a week before that in talking with a couple people, and finally went out there to take a look for myself and was surprised at what had already happened. And then I had the opportunity after the board meeting on September 23rd, I think it was, to walk the prairie with Jack White. So I did have an opportunity to go out there.
Jen, can you explain who Jack White is?
Sure. Jack White is a botanist. He was, I believe, the conservation lead for the Nature Conservancy, the lead ecologist for that, or lead botanist for that group. And he also developed the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory. He developed that survey and how that survey is conducted across the state of Illinois. So he's, I was very taken aback by him because he knows so much about plants, and I know very little about plants. I know about birds. So that opportunity to walk with him on the prairie was very meaningful to me. So I do agree, like, people don't understand what's out there. I knew the place and have known the place as a great place to go birding. And listening to Jack and making those connections about what makes Bellbowl Prairie so special, it was very emotional for me. You start to realize the magnitude of what is about to be lost if we don't do something.
And you alluded to this. Bellbowl Prairie is a Category 1 Illinois Natural Areas Inventory, or INAI, site. Mm-hmm. It's a designation granted by state biologists that reflects the site's very high ecological quality. It's a gravel prairie, and that's even rarer. I think folks need to know that it right now represents about 1/4 of all the remnant gravel prairie in the state of Illinois. So, maybe we need to start using numbers like that, which is you're going to destroy 1/4 of the remnant gravel prairie left in the entire state in a day. is this what's going to happen? And as we mentioned on the show several weeks ago, again, listening to it again this morning, I was struck by it that the INAI recommendation is just a recommendation. It's like it's just an observation. Kerry, I think you mentioned this when we talked about it before. It has no power. It is just the idea that yeah, this is a high quality prairie, and you should be paying attention. And the problem is, so many of these sites are on private lands and not on public lands. If they're on public lands, they're generally protected, but on private lands, we inform the people and say, hey, hope you save it, hope you do something good with it. All right, that takes us to Domenico D'Alessandro, and I want to ask you first. Tell us a little bit about your background, Domenico, and how did you get involved in this issue?
Well, my background is basically in landscape architecture, but for the last 15 years, I've really been concerned with the urban ecology issue because of the impact that it has on the natural issue. And I began to walk away from the traditional landscape practices and planning practices. I think they are about 25 years behind the curve here. We have to really catch up if we want to preserve our environment. So my background is basically trying to figure out how to create habitat niches within the urban context. I have to say one project that I was involved in that is pertinent here. I was involved in the Orange County Great Park project in Irvine, California, and that also dealt with an airport. It was the El Toro Marine Air Base, huge airport, and it was being converted into a housing project, and the town of Irvine asked for a substantial park in return to let the developer build thousands and thousands of homes. So we were tearing down the airport, and the project was really ambitious. We were going to recreate a canyon system, and I was part of the team that was to decide to give the criteria to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the greatest minds in the nation working on it. And the best we could do was to come up with a system where we would be target specific habitats. So we would pick a species of concern and design a habitat for that species, knowing full well that it would take 100, 200, maybe even 300 years for those systems to evolve to a mature ecosystem. So when they say, oh yeah, we can move a plant here or we can seed it there, that is a very ignorant and very dangerous mindset, especially coming from IDNR and people like this. We know that we cannot do that. Every major biologist, every major scientist says that we cannot reproduce a pristine ecosystem. We can only produce a synthesized version. And we talk about birds and butterflies and things that we see, but there are millions of microbes underneath the soil, things that we don't see, the mycelium connections and all that, that we don't even take into consideration. So I think that we unfortunately we suffer from a God syndrome, and we have to get out of that. And given that these systems are so precious, so rare, the best thing to do is preserve every little bit that we have left.
I want to ask you a God syndrome, meaning we think we're gods.
We think we can recreate anything. We think that we can technologize our way out of it. And unfortunately, we've been proven wrong time and time again. I mean, look at the state that we're in. A report just 2 days ago was saying that we could be losing 1 million creatures a year with climate change. I don't understand how we can stand by and use the practices from the 1950s that basically created the problem today. And I think that's what their plan is. I think their plan is right out of the 1950s, 60s, and it needs to be corrected.
And something else you said really resonated with me. What's going to happen here is we're going to break because I have to pay some bills. When we come back, we're going to begin looking at the designs that you presented at a public meeting last Tuesday, and I was sitting in on that public meeting, and the comments ranged. They were all over the place, from conspiracy theories to people saying, "Yeah, let's dig up the plants and move them." When I do garden talks, and this is on obviously a much smaller scale, but folks, even in your own backyard, there's something called the soil food web. And I try to explain what the soil food web is. And I think sometimes I'm able to scratch the surface of that and get people to get an inkling of it. But it's the idea that the biology is there, and everything interacts. I say it's like the inner. I want to say inner tubes. It's like the internet, only dirty, because everything is connected, and it involves macro and micro organisms and soil tilth and things that bind and everything that holds together, and it's about communities, and you can't just lift up an entire community and move it someplace else. You can move
or a portion of that community.
Right. You can move one part of it, but you can't do it en masse. You have to recreate it. You mentioned mature systems. There's by some measure, some people say old growth has to be for like trees has to be 200 years at least, and it's so you can't cut down old growth trees and say, but don't worry, trees are a renewable resource. That's a comment that people make all the time. We'll just plant more trees. Well, yeah, and then in 200 years, come back and we'll have a different ecosystem because you already altered it. You can't recreate what was there that is there now. You can't take it away and expect it to come back exactly the same way. So, is that about right, Domenico?
That's correct. Yeah, and I mean we forget the incredible amount of information we have and philosophy and teachings. You know, E.O. Wilson's biophilia. We have John Muir, who started the whole thing. We have George Fell and thousands of other people. Aldo Leopold. I mean, we're in Aldo Leopold's land, and we forget his message. I suggest that these people read the Sand County Almanac. I mean, this is really an ignorant approach to this planning.
All right, those are our guests. Wonderful comment just came in that asks, "Are there petitions?" Of course, there are petitions. And a couple of the websites you should know about. One is SaveBellBowlPrairie.org. And that is become a really go-to site. It has lists of people you can call. It has links to petitions. It has information about all of this. And there's a link on our website, MikeNovak.net, that will take you to a petition.
Right on the homepage.
Right on the homepage. You can also go on Facebook to Save Bell Bowl Prairie. That gets
There's a Facebook group, that you can join.
Yeah, it's a group that's got a couple of thousand people and is growing every day. If you want to get involved, it's not that hard right now. All right, Kerry Leigh, Domenico D'Alessandro, Jen Kuroda, thank you. We're going to be right back. We'll take a look at what Domenico has in mind for a way we might save the prairie. It's the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Mike Novak Show with Peggy Malecki. Let us reintroduce our guest briefly. Kerry Leigh is the executive director of the Natural Land Institute. Domenico D'Alessandro is a regenerative I can't say that word. Regenerative.
Regenerative.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Peggy. Regenerative design consultant, and Jen Kuroda, president of the Sinnissippi Audubon Society chapter, which is located in Rockford, Illinois. We're talking about how to save Bell Bowl Prairie. So that takes us to a public meeting. And by the way, before we get to this, there's going to be more public meetings, Kerry, aren't there?
Yes, there's another one this Tuesday. So it's at 6 o'clock Central Time at the Burpee Museum in Rockford. And there's also going to be a link sent out to the meeting. The link will be available on the website, savebellbowlprairie.org. And it probably, I think, is also going to be on the Facebook page. So if you want to join in via Zoom, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, and it's easy to do, and you can just hang out in the background and listen to folks talk about this because by what'd you say, Thursday is the next meeting?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Sorry, I
Tuesday.
apologize. I thought I saw something might be. Oh, and there's going to be a protest on, or at least a march on Thursday.
Yes, there's a group of people who are organizing a rally on Thursday because the airport board meeting is due to meet on Thursday if they don't cancel it. We're not sure if it's actually going to be held, but the rally is going to be held, and you can find information about that also on the website and the Facebook page.
All right, fantastic. And by the way, you can uh, find a link to bellbowlprairie.org as well on my website on the homepage. We have a link both to the petition and to bellbowlprairie.org. And as I said, bellbowlprairie.org has a ton of information about this issue. Okay, Domenico, why did you decide to jump into the fray?
Well, I've been very active in the environmental community, and I've been doing this many years, and I thought that I could contribute. I saw the opportunity that this project is headed the wrong way, but it could be corrected. It could be made into a win-win situation.
Yeah, and to be brief, this is the way it's headed right now. Okay, and we hope.
And what does that orange fence represent for our viewers?
I think that's the delineation of the prairie.
So that the area that they've been working already, and then the prairie is beyond that little orange fence there. So this is how close we are to losing this valuable piece of
Wow.
our heritage. Let's take a look at this. This is the first drawing you have. It's you can't read the writing on it, but give us a sense of what we're looking at here, Domenico.
Okay. Yeah, Mike, I would like to take the opportunity also to make a statement because I'm afraid we might run out of time before I have a chance to say this.
Okay.
So all along we've been looking at this in order to save the prairie, and that's fine. But there's also an argument to be made on the profit. And I think the profit margin is what really stirs these people. So we can talk about the prairie for hundreds of years, and it might not reach their ears. But profit margin. So if we go back to that plan, we can see that their plan only provides space for 12 airplanes. And the proposed area that they mark as future development might accommodate another 4 or 5. So let's say that they can service 16 planes. Okay, so if we take say a margin of profit per plane is 100 units. So 100 units times 12 is 1,200. In the plan that I'm proposing, we can accommodate 20 or even 25 planes, depending on how we park them. So just from a profit point of view, we can double their profits and save the prairie. So I would like to know how the chairman of this commission can go to the mayors that appointed them and said, "Hey, mayor, we were so stubborn that we decided that we were going to go with the plan that gives us 50% less profit and destroys the prairie, making us eco criminals." And that's not good for branding. That's not good for branding. So I think we not only have a win-win situation with saving the prairie, but we can double the profit of the airport. And if they're concerned about the money that and the jobs that this project will provide, let's do it with comparison to the profit margin. So I want to state that before we get into the details.
Okay. So what is the? This is a footprint here. What are we looking at?
Okay, so this is their plan. So they have a main building. That's where the merchandise gets unloaded and loaded. But I'd like you to focus on the bottom portion, and you can see employee parking, 16 plus acres. At the corner, you can see dry bottom stormwater management, 9 plus acres. At the right next to the truck yard at the bottom, dry bottom stormwater management, 4 plus acres. Next to the road that they're constructing, dry bottom stormwater management, 6 plus acres. That is land that is placed out of use for the airport. That is land wasted by them in this project. You don't make profits out of a parking lot. You don't make profits out of stormwater management. Those are consuming, those are expenses. So you're placing a lot of expenses where you could be using that land for the profit.
Yeah.
And if we go to the next slide, you can see that they've also added another expansion to the east.
And please point out what side of the screen east. Where's north? Is it
Okay. So north is up,
okay?
south is down. So we would have east is where their midfield cargo building 1 is, and then west is where the gravel extraction pit is.
East
And
is
the prairie is located right in the middle through conceptual
The
cargo
prairie, we
development.
can see it barely, but they cover all of it. So they basically eliminating all the prairie. So if we could go to the next slide,
okay.
what I did, I basically outlined all those areas that I mentioned before, the parking lot and the 3 stormwater catchment basins, and I overlaid them over the prairie. And we can see how similar the areas are. They're practically the same area. So in their plan,
Wait. So let me explain. So you're saying that the amount of land involved in those 4 areas pretty much matches the amount of land that's covered by the prairie right now.
right, exactly, yeah. So what they're doing with their plan is they're eliminating the acreage of virgin prairie and replacing it with a huge parking lot and 3 holes in the ground. That's what they're doing. They're swapping the prairie for a parking lot and 3 holes in the ground
For
because
stormwater.
for stormwater. But that area is completely useless to their operation.
Wow.
That's the point I want to make.
Yeah, there's no profit.
That same area that they're destroying in the virgin prairie, they're wasting in their plan.
All right, and those blocks can be moved elsewhere. Is that right?
Right. So right, exactly. So that's the exercise that I undertook. When I saw this, I saw, hey, this is not the amount of land that they actually need for their operation.
Mhm.
This is wasteland. So I'm not impinging at all on their operation. So when I saw this, I thought, okay, we can do something here because they don't need this land to carry out their profitable operation.
All right.
So if we go to the next slide, you can see I overlaid those same areas. Now I'm converting all that area into an operational profit-making venture, and therefore we can liberate the prairie simply by moving all their infrastructure down along belt line,
Moving it to the southwest.
moving it to the southwest along belt line, and this does two important things. One, it eliminates the roads that are needed for the truck movement because now the trucks have easy access to Beltline. It's basically an in and out. So where the truck docks are, that's where the loading takes place.
Mm-hmm.
So you come in, you park, you load, and you go out straight. You don't need any further roads. Yet you have the truck yard right next to it. That's where you park your trucks. And then to replace the 16-acre open uh, um, parking lot, which is one of our scourges, our planning scourges, we simply construct an employee parking garage. So that will benefit the employees immensely because we are a northern country, we are in the northern area, we get snow, we get all kinds of inclement weather, and you rather be inside. You'd rather have your vehicle inside a parking structure than out there in the cold, and then you have to shovel the snow and remove the snow, and all that shoveling and piling up of the snow, and the de-icing that it takes to do that, plus all the gas expenditures for the big snow plows. So we are reducing their CO2 emissions. We are reducing their de-icing needs, and therefore, and also the snow piling areas, uh, and I mean, it saves them money and it saves the environment.
All right. What is the dotted line going through the prairie on this map?
Well, that's just their construction area. That's the delineated construction
Okay.
zone.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And
And for any of our listeners who are just joining, I was going to mention that this is cargo expansion. This is not passenger air. This is cargo. So we're
Right.
not talking a big terminal.
Right. Right. And if Amazon is the one that you're trying to attract, I would say it's a much better deal that you can say, hey, we can service 25 of your planes rather than 12. You know, I I think it's a good pitch to make to whoever company you're trying to service.
yeah. And here's the an aerial view here, and you can see the prairie is delineated. I mean, for those folks watching it and thinking that prairie looks pretty endangered, it looks pretty fragile next to all of that industry and all of those buildings and an airport. And our response would be, yeah, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is very fragile, isn't it, Kerry?
Yes, it sure is. It's gravel and sand, uh, and but the thing about it is, the Natural Land Institute has been managing this prairie since the 1970s at no cost to the airport. The Natural Land Institute and its partners, the Winnebago County Forest Preserve, the Boone County Forest Preserve, the Byron Forest Preserve District, other not-for-profit partners, and the Illinois DNR have been managing this prairie for them.
All right.
So in this slide, you can see the road that they already built. That's the yellowish uh, um, way there that you see.
Yeah, kind of the
Uh,
beige road at the
Yeah,
at the
down at the
bottom.
right,
bottom.
right.
Yeah, right.
So that part
That's where the
they've
bulldozer
already
photo is.
They're
done.
trying to go across. They've stopped at the prairie, and their idea is to cut right through it at that point.
Right. and they're cutting right through the heart of the highest quality prairie. That's the heart of the highest quality prairie.
To get to a parking lot.
To get to so if you go to the next slide, I'll explain that. Okay, so this is the road that they're trying to construct. Now, if they have to go through the prairie, they would need to put a lot of fill in there to make up for the difference in elevation. And you can see they have a lot of riprap on the sides of the road to make it stable. And then they have to create all kinds of infrastructure in order to drain it properly. So it's not just the road, but look at the width that they need to do this road, to disrupt the prairie. I mean, they're basically killing the prairie with this road. So if you go to the next slide, so in their concept, they need this road because you can see where the trucks will leave with their loads, right? So if you go to their conceptual cargo development main building as they have it here, at that corner, that's where the trucks leave those truck docks to get to Beltline, right? So by simply moving that building, we eliminate the need for that road. That road does not need to be built. And another thing, we eliminate another road, which is the yellow dotted line, which is the route that the trucks take to the yard, to the truck yard. So just by shifting that building to align with Beltline, we eliminate those two roads. They don't need them. Now, what they do need is another road that will take the cargo from their Millfield cargo building one that did this development to the east. So what I did here, I showed in purple how that road could actually connect back to Beltline. And it can go on an existing road that's already there. They might have to upgrade it in order to take on the heavy traffic, the heavy load, excuse me, to take on the heaviness of the trucks. But that's a much easier exercise than trying to build a road through the prairie, even in cost. And also, the connection can be made at the south end by simply widening Cessna Drive. You can widen Cessna Drive by 2 lanes and have your truck route.
And that's at the bottom of this
That's
screen.
at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then you can see in the parking area with the image, I don't know how clear it is, but that parking area is only half full. And if this image is any indication of its use, then we can eliminate portion of the parking to make room for this road. And they still have all the connections that they need.
And this is where the idea of whether a parking lot is more valuable than a prairie comes in.
Exactly. So they're afraid to touch their parking lot, but they're so willing to eliminate the prairie. I mean, I think with a little bit of finesse, things can work out. We can accommodate their needs very simply and possibly a less cost to them.
Okay, so what does this final slide represent then?
Okay, so this final slide is particularly in answer to IDNR or the environmental impact assessment that basically declared that there's no significant habitat here to protect, which is a outface lie. It was based on a 1 day in August assessment, which cannot be the proper way to do an environmental impact assessment.
Well, that's one of the points that the airport authority is making is that, hey, we did everything by the book. We did the assessment, and it showed that there's nothing there worth saving. So let's move on.
Right, and I think that can be challenged in court very easily because there are a lot of experts around that that can be expert witnesses to challenge that assumption.
One of the things that you mentioned the other day, I want to call attention to it. Okay, if you look at the upper center there, and you'll see sort of a red area, the green outline, and then red inside. That is the prairie. You have you think the prairie, which is now kind of isolated, can be connected to existing ecosystems in the area.
Right, and that's what this plan shows. Because the reason I think that the NR is so quickly dismissing this prairie is because it is isolated. It is not connected to a larger ecosystem. And I think their reasoning is that, well, it's isolated, it's going to degrade, why fight it? But with the purchase of 38.5 acres, and that's the area I designate in yellow,
Mm-hmm.
we can do a biological connection to the Kishwaukee River corridor. So those 38.5 acres can be converted into a synthetic prairie, but it will provide a biological connection to the existing prairie,
To the corridor.
to the corridor. I think this is something that the Nature Conservancy should look at, because you can see how incredibly intricate that corridor can be at the mouth of the Kishwaukee River, where it meets the Rock River.
So,
I
so
think that is an incredible opportunity
that's the point I
for a
want to make is
variety of habitats.
you're not just saving the prairie, you might possibly be improving it at this point, which I think is a remarkable consideration.
Right. I think, biological corridors are necessary because we lost a lot of habitat because of this cutting up of the pieces, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then, of course, the development will come in and fill the space. Uh, so I think here with the simple purchase of 38.5 acres, it could be easily accomplished.
That's a remarkable presentation, Domenico. That
Thank you.
yes, it actually gives one hope here for what might be accomplished. So next steps, Kerry Leigh, is just the same. Just keep the pressure on and ratchet it up. I mean, you have basically a week to get this done.
Yes, and a lot can happen in a week. So we would really encourage people to tune in on Tuesday to the public meeting.
Hmm.
Yeah, and if you are so moved to be part of the rally, you could be part of that on Thursday as well. Um, Jen, what do you see as the work for Sinnissippi right now?
I'm definitely going to continue to reach out to legislators and other groups. There will be additional events on the weekend, Saturday the 30th, so additional time to meet with people as a group and meet some of these people that you've been doing advocacy work with, and more will be out about that early next week as well.
And if you don't, we're going to sick that bear on you that is behind
Right.
you. I mean, I had to call attention to the bear. If you're listening on the podcast, you don't get to see the bear that has a sign that says "Save Bell Bowl Prairie," and it's not quite life size, but it's substantial behind Jen Kuroda. I like it. We all like it. Folks, thank you so much for doing this again. My sincerest apologies for technical problems at the very, very beginning of the show, but I think we've accomplished what we hoped to accomplish today. Is there anything anybody wants to add before I let you all go?
I would like to say something that I neglected to mention. Um, so the catchment basin, the stormwater basin, would be replaced by innovative porous paving and alternative stormwater system for the area where the planes are serviced.
That's a really good point. I mean, if their concern is the storage of storm water, porous paving is something that I think more people consider. Peggy and I talked about an initiative that we wanted to start in Chicago, which is called Unpave 50%. The idea being take 50% of our impermeable uh, pavement in the city and make it permeable somehow. I don't know how that happens, but it is something that it occurred to us because we're going to have less flooding if that happens.
Yeah.
Domenico, you're
Also, I think this is one area where they might object, but this is already being done in the Netherlands and other places, and there is a guide available on how to do porous paving for airports.
all right. Kerry Leigh, Domenico D'Alessandro, Jen Kuroda, thank you so much for being here.